Good day, folks, particularly the matrics. I know that you guys are quite busy preparing for the upcoming exams. So I want us to look at some past papers. So in this video, I want us to look at functions questions. I want us to look at last year's paper, the 2024 paper 1, but I'd like us to begin with the functions. So this is taken from the Gauteng 2024 paper, the prelim, and the functions, they begin at question 4. So let's get into it, and I'm hoping that this will benefit you in your preparations. So in question 4, they give you a sketch, right, with a function, a graph drawn on it. I've drawn it in blue. They say the equation of the function is f of x is equal to ax squared and x is less than or equal to 0. Okay, so what does this mean? The x squared tells us that it's definitely that it's a parabola, right? Because it's got an x squared, and the a, as you know, it tells us about the horizontal stretch. It tells us how wide or how narrow this graph is. But I want us to focus on this. X is less than equal to 0. What does this mean? It means that, like I say, it's a parabola, right? And you know that a parabola is either a happy face or a sad face. So normally this graph would look like this. Okay, this is what we used to. But now they go and say x is less than or equal to 0. So this is what we call a restriction. Okay, they are restricting to the domain to only the parts where x is less than or equal to 0. So if this is my x is less than or equal to 0 going that way, beginning at 0 going to the left. So it means that this part is not there. Okay, it's a parabola, but with a restriction. And they say that this point, so this line goes through the point -6, -8. And they've given it to you and shown it to you on the sketch. All right, so let's begin to answer the question now. Question 4.1 for 2 marks wants you to find the value of the a. Okay, so now remember f of x is simply y. Okay, they've just chosen to give it a name and call it f instead of y. So it's y is equal to ax squared. They want me to find this variable. I cannot solve for a now because I've got 3 unknowns. So if I have one equation, I need to have 1 unknown. So if I can find numbers to put in here, in the y and in the x, then I'm good to go. Where am I going to find the x and the y? You can get them from any point that the line goes through. Fortunately, they've given us a point. Okay, that's my x, that's my y. So I can put these 2 in here, right? So instead of y, I'll put -8. Instead of x, I'll put -6. Now I can solve for a. So -8 is equal to a times 36, right? So I can divide both sides by 36, right? If you simplify that, your a will be equal to -2 over 9. Okay, so this means that this graph, the equation is actually -2 over 9 x squared. Happy? Lovely. So that's 2 easy marks. Let's look at 4.2. For 2 marks again. Give the equation of the inverse. How do I know it's an inverse? They're asking me for this. F to that -1. That -1 means an inverse. And they say they want it in the form y is equal to something. I'm going to upload this question paper to this video, maybe in the comment section, so you can open it and see the entire paper. So they want the inverse, right? but they want it in the form y is equal to something, right? So what does the word inverse mean? It just means invert. So x becomes y becomes x, right? So remember, we have y is equal to minus 2 over 9x squared. So swap, y becomes x and x becomes y. Now we need to solve for y. It's as easy as that. I want y on its own, so let's first get rid of this. So we're going to divide both sides by negative 2 over 9, right? And now remember, if you're dividing by a fraction, you tip in time, so it reciprocates the denominator. So this will now be 9 over 2x is equal to y squared. You square root both sides because I want y, not y squared. So I square root the entire thing. So my y will be equal to, usually, if you are square rooting, you take the positive and the negative, remember? Okay, but now, we're not going to take both in this case. Why? Because my x is negative, right? So if my x is negative, or if my x is less than or equal to 0, in the inverse, my y will be less than or equal to 0. So my y will only be negative, less than or equal to 0. So we do not include the positive part. Okay, and that is the equation of the inverse in the form y is equal to something, right? And that was 2 marks. Let's look then at question 4.3. They want the range of this inverse. They want the range of the inverse for 1 mark. All right, so like we said, x becomes y becomes x with the inverse. In the original, they said my x is less than or equal to 0. Okay, so in the inverse, it means that my y is less than or equal to 0. And my y is the range. Okay, so it's as easy as that. 1 easy mark without having sketched it. If you wanted to, you could sketch this and then read the range from the graph. Okay, but there was no need, and it's only 1 mark. Right, so let's move on. 4.4. Now it gets exciting. 4.4. They say what? Sketch the graph of the inverse. Indicates the coordinates of any point on the graph different to 0, 0. Now they want us to draw the sky and indicate any point that lies on the graph. Okay, so let me just quickly draw a Cartesian plane. This will guide us a lot. Remember, in the inverse, everything is back to front. So it means that my inverse goes through -8, -6. All right? It goes through -8, -6. We know that. And we know that the range is negative. Okay. So if this is the original, okay, you don't have to draw this on your answer. I'm just doing it to guide you. That's the original graph. Now we want a graph that goes through, sorry, that's minus. That's going to go through -8, -6. So it means that my graph will go through there, somewhere there. Let's make this -8, -6. Okay? Right? I'm going to draw this graph in red. Right? So it's going to go through this point, and it it's got a y, the y is negative. So it's somewhere in this quadrant, definitely. So it just means that my graph will then go like that, something like that. This here in red is the inverse. Okay. And another thing that should assure you that the graph looks something like that is because you and I both know that the inverse is a reflection of a graph about the line y is equal to x. Now the line y is equal to x goes something like that. It goes something like that. This is y is equal to x. So my inverse, the red graph, is a reflection of the blue graph over this line. So if you flip it over, okay, so let's get rid of this, the original, so that the inverse can be clearly seen. And that is my inverse. So it says, show the coordinates of any other point except 0, 0. So that is the point. -8, -6. And that was how many marks? Only 2. Okay. Right. 4.5 says the graph of f, the original, is reflected about the line y is equal to x, and thereafter it is reflected across the x-axis. Determine the equation of the new function in the form y is equal to blah, blah, blah. All right. So if you take that, so two things are done to this graph. It's reflected over the line y is equal to x. So if you reflect it over the line y is equal to x, what do you get? You get the inverse. So we get this one, right? And that's its equation. And it doesn't end there. They say this graph is then reflected over the x-axis. Okay, so let's answer 4.5 for 2 marks. So let me go through it again. The original is reflected over the line y is equal to x, giving us the inverse. And then this inverse now is reflected over the x-axis. So what happens when you reflect something over the x-axis? Okay, you should know that if you reflect something over the x-axis, the x stays the same, but the y changes its sign. What do I mean? I mean, for example, if you take a point, let's say, this is just an example, -8 and I don't know, -4, right? If you reflect this over the x-axis, so it means you're flipping it over like that, okay? So the new point will be somewhere there. You see, the x doesn't change. The image doesn't move horizontally, so my x will still be -8, but my y will change sign. There's no way that this can still be -4. Okay, it's now going to be a +4 because it's now above the x-axis. So the same happens to a function, right? So remember, x stays the same, y changes its sign. So we are dealing with this guy, right? So do you see that he is negative? Okay, so now the equation of the graph, which is reflected over the x-axis, means you must change the sign of y. You see my y is negative, so it means that it's simply going to be the positive version of this. That is the equation of this new function. I hope that makes sense. And that is question 4 for 9 marks.